Hello, and welcome to So How Are You Doing? This podcast focuses on the new reality we find ourselves in since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Humans are inherently social creatures, which makes this a particularly trying time for us. As we social distance, self-isolate, and self-quarantine, this podcast aims to offer another way to connect with people, to hear and share what we're all going through together. My guest for this episode is Alejandro, a therapist living in Buenos Aires. We'll discuss how Argentina is responding to the pandemic and what work and life are like now under the country's current lockdown. Thanks for subscribing. Now on to our interview. Hi, Alejandro. Thanks for speaking with me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, how are you doing?
I think I'm doing a mix of things. I'm doing well in relative terms, especially as I see the news. I'm in a sheltered, comfortable place. At the same time, sometimes I get really bored and tired of self-isolation, and it's a little bit hard. I'm here in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and we've had mandated nationwide shelter in place since March 19th without the option of going out for walks or recreationally. We can only go out for basic grocery shopping. And unless you have a specific permit or you're considered an essential worker, you have to stay in. So I really miss going out for bike riding and just exercising outdoors and stuff. So that's a little bit hard, but I'm doing okay. Definitely.
That sounds rough. That's pretty different than here.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean you can go to the store every day, or is that limited? How is that monitored and enforced?
I guess you can go out as many times as you want in the sense of, I think if you go to the store and come back several times a day, nobody's going to say, well, I don't know. There have been some incidents of actually people getting in trouble with neighbors. I've heard stories of people going out too much and then neighbors getting upset at the prospects of somebody bringing the stuff into the public areas in the building and stuff. But in general, there is some enforcement. Like if you're driving around, they're stopping cars and checking that you have the permit to be driving around. But if you go to the store, I don't know, at the national political leadership level, there has been good communication from the beginning about this is dangerous. And I think overall people have embraced that attitude of self-regulating, self-restraining in terms of how often they go out. And so I think most people are not going out a lot unless they really need to. So I go probably every 2 or 3 days. I do go out every day because my mother is 87 and she lives alone and she's a couple of blocks away. So I do have a permit to go check in on her. And so I go every night for 20 minutes or so. So that's my outing. Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, that is a little different. Over here, I'm trying to only go grocery shopping every week or two.
Uh-huh.
But I can go out and exercise, take walks around the neighborhood, and ride my bike.
Right. Yeah.
There's a difference in that way.
Yeah, exactly. So you have that flexibility of some recreational.
Yeah.
I mean, you can still go out, right? Pretty much.
Yeah. So you live in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I haven't heard much news from there regarding the coronavirus. Could we start with you walking me through the timeline of the response measures there?
Sure. Yeah. Argentina, given that it's how would you call it? Geopolitically, is out of the mainstream of Europe and North America. The first cases arrived in Argentina, I think, early March. And they were very few, at least tested, because maybe there were more. But as the news was going on in Europe and Asia, there were no cases yet in Argentina. And then by early March, there were the first positives that were announced. And then I don't remember exactly when it was. The first death was on March 7th. And from then on, the government started taking some steps to lax public workers. And then later on, there were more cases. And by March 11, when the World Health Organization declared that it was a pandemic, came something that they decided to take more steps. And then the president went on national television and announced that there were going to be some more measures. The mandated quarantine was put in place on March 19th. And by now, I think Argentina has 5,000 infected people and 260 deaths, which is really, quite a bit less than what's going on in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the population of Argentina, approximately?
I think around 45 million, 45, 50 million. So let's say 10% of the population of the US. But when you look at the proportions, there have been quite less deaths and stuff because of the, I guess, more restrictive measures of people staying indoors.
Yeah. Argentina's response seems closer to Italy's, where it was a blanket quarantine.
Yeah.
I mean, how long that has to be done for is the question.
Yeah, exactly.
You're in your country's largest city, and those restrictions seem to make sense there. Do you know if there are different measures going on in rural areas in the countryside, or do smaller towns have the same restrictions?
Originally, it was nationwide. And I think a week ago, the federal government decided that each provincial government could present to the federal government a proposal for how to lax the regulations or the restrictions in their provinces. And then the federal government has created a committee of epidemiologists and public health experts. They would assess and authorize it. So I think by now, there are a few provinces that have presented their own custom measures, and I think they have been approved. So I was reading today, there was something like over 90 small towns here, just in the greater Buenos Aires area, that have more flexibility. Buenos Aires, DC, has the highest density as in the center. So we're still all on mandated total shelter in place. But the greater Buenos Aires has small rural towns that have been now made more lax in terms of mandated quarantine. And then the provinces, I think some provinces have made more flexible arrangements too. But the country is pretty much paralyzed on many levels.
Could you tell me about your job? What was your work routine like in February, before the outbreak?
I work as a therapist. Here in Buenos Aires, I work with mostly English speakers who live here, Americans and Europeans who live in Argentina. I have an office here in downtown, and I was seeing clients face to face for most of it. But because I work with a lot of expats who travel, most of my clients have also mixed face-to-face sessions with online video sessions too. So I had with many clients, I had some experiences already. There were a couple of weeks that were pretty stressful when we didn't have a formal shelter in place, and it wasn't clear what was going on, and authorities here weren't reacting. So you were pretty much negotiating that with clients. So I came up with a protocol. It's customary here in Argentina for people to kiss cheek to cheek. And so even Americans who are here, they try to adapt to the local custom. So some clients were in the habit of kissing. We kissed cheek to cheek and welcome and then goodbye. So I sent this protocol saying that from now we would just wave, not even use the elbow. Just if it's okay, we will wave, that I will have alcohol. They look in my office as hand sanitizers. If they had been in contact with anybody who had coming from Europe or the US, that we'd rather wait and do video sessions and so on. So after March 19th, because everybody was required to stay home, we naturally migrated to video sessions.
You're obviously working from home now. Are you still working with all the same clients you were seeing before? Have you lost any clients from this?
I'm seeing about, I'd say about 75% of my clients, because again, they were already used to, they have had good experiences, and I feel very comfortable working via online. But what has happened is that some of my clients have lost their income, we are now working with a very, very reduced fee, trying to sustain the space for the work in the midst of how many of their finances being so affected. Yeah, that's a big change. Some people are really stressed.
That seems to be a problem that's going on everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there clients who are not using video conferencing before that have had problems adjusting to it?
Those who have, when I say that I'm working with about 75% of my clients, I guess the other 25% are people who had not tried video or phone and decided to wait until they could go back. But I'm not working with anyone who has been trying now the video platform and not be okay with it.
So, do you feel like you can keep going somewhat indefinitely like this, working online with your patients?
I think so. Yeah. I don't think that's going to be the case, and I hope it's not going to be the case. But yeah, I feel quite fortunate to have this possibility. Had this happened 10 years ago, we would be in a different, we are quite protected in that sense. Yes.
With this level of work and client load, do you feel financially secure right now? Do you feel like you'll be okay if this lasts a few more months or longer?
Yes, fortunately, yes. Yeah, I feel quite safe. I've been doing this for quite a bit, so I do have a solid base of clients and referral sources. So I feel comfortable financially.
As a generalization, and not to be specific about anyone in particular,
Yeah, sure.
how are your patients reacting both to the pandemic as a health risk and also the imposed measures by the government, the lockdown that everybody's living with?
Yeah.
What's the general take on that by your client base?
Yeah. So my client base is Americans and Europeans or English speakers living here in Argentina. So most of my clients are very connected to Europe and the US and the news from Europe and the US. Something that I keep hearing, which is very unusual for being in Argentina. I keep hearing my clients being grateful of being in Argentina under the current leadership of this government that has mandated the shelter in place right away and has enforced a lot of measures to protect people's health. And as you know, politics in the US are very problematic these days. So a lot of my clients are getting very depressed about the news that they read about what's going on politically in the US. I get depressed myself. So there is a mixture of, there is the added stressor that their source of income has been totally affected. So that increases stress. For some people, it's very hard to be in Argentina for the first time ever in their lives, being in a situation where they cannot leave a country and they cannot go back home. And so for some people, it's very difficult to imagine that something could happen to their family members or elderly parents, and they would not be able to be there for them. So that's hard for people. Each person, including me and colleagues and the community, we have our own lives and habits, and there's really a wide spectrum of reactions. But yeah, it is stressful. Some people are getting really tired of talking about the coronavirus. So another thing that I hear a lot, and I don't know if you hear this locally in the US, well, I guess in other places you can still go out and spend some time with people, I guess. Not really, right? Can you
You're not supposed to.
even if you keep social distance, can you still not supposed to?
No, you can do that. Like today, I biked over to my friend's house and had lunch at opposite ends of a picnic table in his backyard. And I brought my own food.
Exactly. Well, right. So you have that. Exactly. But here, for example, in Argentina, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to leave your house. So nobody's supposed to go to your house. You're not supposed to go to anybody's house. You're not supposed to go shopping and, quote unquote, by chance meet your friend on the way there. So you're not supposed to do any of that. In any case, people here, especially expats who live in Argentina, are constantly communicating with family members and friends via Zoom or WhatsApp or Skype. And for some people at the beginning, it felt good. It was like this is good that we're actually communicating, but for now it's getting old and people are exhausted of being on social media or some form of digital system to connect with people. And now that you mentioned going to your friend's house to spend some time, the big piece that is also happening is just isolation is difficult, both for those who live alone. It's difficult for just loneliness and physical isolation and so on. But for those who live in relationships or family groups, it's also hard to be with the same person so much. And so each setting has its challenges.
I know. I feel like I hear talk of expected increases in the divorce rate to come after the shelter-at-home orders are lifted here, like what we see in China.
I clearly see that big booming divorce rate, big booming pregnancies, maybe.
Yeah, that too.
A big booming trying to lose weight. I've been gaining so much weight. I tell you, this restriction, not to be able to go for runs, not to be able to get out of my apartment. I feel like a chicken with the lights on.
Here, I feel like there's a New Year's resolution-esque aspect to quarantine. I've seen a lot of people jogging that have a very "I'm new to this" vibe.
Yeah.
But good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can go out. We cannot go for runs or jogs. Yeah, it's hard.
I hadn't thought about the expats. So at a certain point, they couldn't leave the country? Were flights shut down?
Right. Yeah. The borders are closed for incoming flights and outgoing flights. Now, each country, they've activated protocol of bringing nationals. So I have known through acquaintances and people who are from different countries, you can sign up through the embassy. They put you in a wait list and then they have these special flights and they take you back. Where some of the expats who live here in Argentina don't want to go back to place of origin because they live here. Their home is here, or their businesses are here, they might have partners here, but they want to have the freedom to be able to spend time with their family members or just having that possibility. So if they sign up for this repatriation, so if you sign up for that, I think they bring you, not for you to go see your parent, but they bring you just for you to stay there. So those people are not using those. I'm a US citizen, so I get this communication from the US Embassy. So I got this email saying that there's a flight from Eastern Airlines, which I didn't know. Eastern Airlines, I thought it was bankrupt.
Oh, yeah. That went out of business like 30 years ago?
In any case, there are a few flights going to the US, and I don't know who's signing up to go into those flights, but those are like one-way tickets. Yeah.
You are listening to So How Are You Doing? Conversations about life in the COVID-19 era. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe and rate this podcast on iTunes. It really helps. Thanks. Now, back to my interview with Alejandro in Buenos Aires. So for you, can you tell me about your housing situation? Where do you live?
I live in Buenos Aires in an apartment that I realized how wonderful it is that it has a balcony. So I live in an area called Palermo, which is sort of, it's like the Soho of New York-ish in a way.
How big is your apartment?
It's a 2-bedroom, big living room, big kitchen, comfortable bathroom, and the balcony. Yeah, pretty big.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty big for one person because I live alone, so it's okay.
Sounds decent size. As I talk with different people, I hear about different situations,
Sure.
especially people living in large cities where you might spend a lot of time out regularly, and maybe the size of your apartment isn't normally so important. And then you get into this situation where everything changes and you're reevaluating that size.
That's true.
So you're seeing your mother every day for a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How is she doing? How is she taking all of this?
Well, it's interesting because I think she's actually doing pretty well. I was concerned. She's 87 and she's at a point where sometimes she gets a bit disoriented. She's pretty aware and dynamic mentally, but nonetheless, sometimes she struggles a bit, especially because she lives alone and with all these changes at the beginning, there are two people who take care of her that just go a little bit during the day, both of them. And because of this quarantine, they stopped going. And I was a bit concerned about her isolation. So we arranged for these two caretakers to call her every day. One calls her at 11, the other one calls her at 4. And then I go around 6 and spend a little bit of time with her. And she's doing quite okay. I think there's an element here that I hadn't thought of, but because of the quarantine and everything that is going on, a lot of my family and old friends are calling her. This issue that people are activating more communication, at least through phone and messages. She's getting a lot of calls from people. And so she's feeling more connected. And then the other piece that I was thinking about is that in this mandated shelter in place where we're all stuck inside, in a way, she shares the experience with everyone because she's always stuck in, not always, but from the past 2 years, she's been most of the time indoors. So there is a feeling where she's somehow, all of us are in the same place with her, or she's with everyone, not isolated, but indoors all the time. And then she's getting phone calls. So she seems to be in a good mood. She's worried, but I try to tell her to be careful with it, how much she watches the news and stuff. But she seems to be doing okay.
It's nice to hear that she's getting positive benefits out of the situation.
Yeah, I think she's in an okay place.
So your mom's there. What about the rest of your family? Do you have other family in Buenos Aires or in other parts of the country? How are they doing?
They're doing okay. Yeah, I have cousins. One of my cousins, he has his own company. It's a parking space service for people who travel. So his whole business is paralyzed right now. I have another cousin who is a doorman at a building. So he's also having to navigate adjusting to safety issues with the public spaces and taking care of himself. And the wife was very stressed about, his level of exposure. And then I have other cousins who are doing quite well. I have an older aunt who is also doing shelter in place. And I try to call her, but she also seems to be doing okay. There's something interesting again. It calls my attention how okay they are. I just want to go back to this, that I think a lot of us are calling them more often. And if you look at the sort of dynamics of their day have not changed that much for people of her age, like 87, 89, because they weren't really very active outside of their home. All of a sudden, they're getting all these phone calls from families and friends just checking in on them. So, she's doing okay.
Sounds like you have friends in other countries. Are you keeping up with them and hearing what's going on in different places?
Yeah. I have one friend that I communicate very often in Portland, several times a week. And then, other friends too. I just set up times to spend time with them and on Skype or Zoom or the phone. And then New York, I have a friend that I speak every week. And then we send WhatsApp. In the US, we don't use WhatsApp that much, but here it's very common. And once I have my friends starting to get used to it, the good thing about WhatsApp is that you can send voice messages and pictures. And so we do send each other a lot of sound registers. Like in the mornings, I have some friends who like birds. So we share those urban sounds and they send me sounds too. So there's a lot of back and forth of experiences and sharing thoughts. And I do feel quite connected.
I usually ask people how worried they are about contracting the virus. With the level of lockdown going on in Argentina, are you that worried about getting the disease itself?
Sure.
Or your mother?
I feel quite safe again because of the measures that are in place and because I feel like I'm exposing myself very little, like I'm most of the time indoors, right? But when I do go out, and I do go out every day, I do feel a bit anxious, particularly for my mother, because if I get it, I'm just concerned about bringing it to her. So every time I go into her apartment, I use alcohol in my hands and wash my hands and then spray alcohol on some of the stuff that I touch and just be very careful about that. But I think I will be concerned once the measures get more relaxed and we're able to move around more. Yeah, I am a little bit concerned. I don't know if I'll lose sleep over it, but I definitely want to be careful. I wear my mask and I will make sure that I take proper caution. So I don't take it lightly. I'm 48. I think I'm relatively safe given some of the parameters in terms of my health and such, but I wouldn't want to go through having it, definitely. It scares me.
I know you hear these anecdotal stories about it, people in their 30s getting it.
Yeah.
Pretty much for anyone, once you go into the hospital, it's bad. You're going to be dealing with it for months, even if it's not fatal.
Mhm.
Seems like something you want to avoid,
Sure.
even though some people can have it and not know it, and others have mild symptoms.
Right.
So I'm wondering, with the strict level of measures there, are you heading towards a level of eradication?
I doubt that it'll be eradicated here because I'm not so sure how many people have been tested or if the number that the government has is representative of what's actually happening. So even if the number of positives begins to go down, I'm sure there's a whole segment of the population that will never be tested, and who knows if it'll continue to circulate. I think even the president said that the expectation is not to have zero cases, that this will basically continue circulating until we have a vaccine. But the goal of the lockdown was to pace the need for the use of healthcare facilities, just because the country wouldn't be able to process a high demand if it happened. I think that's what's happening everywhere. But I don't think there will be zero cases until we have a vaccine.
That seems like the same intended path as the US, but you've locked it down more.
Yeah.
Seems like all these measures, once you release people back out to a somewhat normal routine, you're going to lose that.
Mm-hmm.
You're just pushing things out until there's a vaccine, or there's a much higher percentage of testing to be able to do contact tracing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how much testing is being done in Argentina?
I know they've been testing more, nothing close to other places. I think the testing has not been the priority because the priority has been to enforce the lockdown. So I think testing has a different significance if you're using a model where the economy is open or people are circulating. In that case, I think you have to push more. Like I was reading news from England, and they're making it a main point of their national conversation is 100,000 tests a day because they want to have an open economy with a lot of testing. But Argentina is pretty much frozen in shelter. I think testing has been important, but I don't think the government is testing massively.
That seems fairly common.
Yeah,
I know we're having the same issues here.
yeah,
Sounds like we're at least a year out from a vaccine, so testing and contact tracing are the only real alternatives to opening up the economy,
yeah.
but they're nowhere near the number of tests happening daily to be able to hit that mark.
Yeah, well, there is pressure to open up the economy here and to start activating some sectors. Argentina has a relatively weak economy and has been in serious financial trouble in the last 2 years. So having the economy paralyzed is not something sustainable for most people. The government came up with a sort of a universal bonus or government subsidized money for people who apply and qualify who don't have income, but that's not enough. So people need to start earning again.
So I've been aware that Argentina has had economic issues with debt and the International Monetary Fund,
Uh-huh.
and there's been a persistent problem with inflation for decades now.
Yeah.
How is this shutdown factoring into those elements?
The reason why I laugh, and I didn't laugh out of joy, I just laugh because I had an insight as I listened to you. Somehow I had the notion of how to characterize this is, the same thing that in the US, we are sick and tired of war. And what's the next country that we're going to be invading? And the same thing in Argentina with financial crisis and hyperinflation is it's such a part of daily awareness and the pain that we have. And so the last 4 years, we had a government who took so much debt. So the current government belongs to a party tied to the Peronist party, which is considered the center left party in Argentina that governed for many years and so on. But until a year ago, there was another party that was more like open market party. the open economy, more aligned to the US. Those people, the past administration took so much debt that as soon as Argentina started having to pay back, it was just overwhelming. It's just not tenable. My point is, prior to the coronavirus now in March, for the last 6 months, Argentina was already starting to default on foreign debt, which means a whole mess about access to finances. So the economy was beginning to be really bad prior to Corona. So with a new government that came on power 5 months ago and the Corona happening at the same time, this new government is trying to renegotiate all this foreign debt. So the country is in a situation of default, the economy is paralyzed, and the government is trying to renegotiate the foreign debt. In a way, the fact that all this stuff is happening may help the government take a break in terms of paying back, just because the situation is so dire. So the situation is bad, but the prospects is that maybe the government can pull off a renegotiation of the foreign debt that will alleviate payments in the future. And Argentina is not an industrial country. It's pretty much agricultural exporter. So I think in the longer run, this will not affect the economy too bad because Argentina will be going back to exporting food. But in the short run, people need money. The government sanctioned legislation to freeze evictions and also froze payment of credit card debt for 2 months. Also, for the next month, companies could not fire employees, and the government would give a percentage of the salary to the company. They had to go through a process, and if they get approved, the government pays for a part of their salary. But there's a big percentage of the economy that is under the table, that are not legal in the sense, like workers are not properly enrolled in tax. So all those people are now being covered by this legislation. So it still leaves a big unprotected sector. But there have been a lot of proactive measures to protect a lot of people. But yeah, the economy is not doing well, definitely.
Interesting. Some of those programs seem similar to those happening in the US, and some are different. Many of our programs seemed promising when they were first announced and launched.
Yeah.
But as they're getting into practice, they are not working.
Sure.
They are not getting money to the right people. Do your programs seem to be actually working there? How are they going?
Well, when I think about the government giving 10,000 pesos each month, I think it's, in relative terms, it's a lot more than $1,200 for workers. So I would say 10,000 pesos per month, as the government here is giving, is half of a basic salary each month. So in that way, I guess it's a little bit better. Yeah, I don't think any of this is sustainable. I think there's just like little patches to buffer a little bit the big abyss. I think in the US, the money has been diverted a lot to corporations, and here it's been more directly to the workers or the companies to then channel that to the workers. Like the notion of not firing people. I know, for example, in the US, plenty companies are firing people. We're here, at least is not legal, although I'm sure many companies are doing it, but there's that protection of the law.
Well, it sounds like everyone is dealing with the same kind of things.
Definitely.
It's interesting to hear how people are handling it there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I should have asked you, or any observations that you've had that have stuck with you?
Yeah, something that is calling my attention, now that it's just something that I'm really celebrating, is that I'm seeing certain things happening that are positive. For example, some of the monasteries in the States, one is the Pacific Hermitage, they turned their activities online. Being that I'm here in Buenos Aires, I was missing attending the activities there, but now they're all online. Something that was negative or started as a restriction now has turned that, for example, there is a virtual retreat where usually there are 20 people that go to the retreat. And now there are like 400 people that sign up just because it's online. So for people from all over the world can do it. So I think for some people who are migrating into the digital world because of the circumstances, this is allowing some of the treasures that are usually localized to be spread to a wider audience. So I think that's one of the positives that I see. And the other one that I was mentioning before is like the two elderlies in my family are being called a lot more now. It's just because we are all like activated a little bit more in checking in with each other. And so I wonder how many more people are receiving more phone calls, and there's a extra effort to connect with each other. And that might be a good thing. Oh, and then let me just another one. I don't think we have had an experience where we have been all forced to somehow slow down, given that we are in these frantic times. And I'm not saying this is good, but by no means, this is not a good thing what's happening. But the fact that we are required to slow down, at least in Argentina, by having to be indoors, a lot of us are beginning to realize that, yeah, we want to slow down a little bit. And I've heard several people say that. They're feeling that they're connecting a little bit more with routines and with the home, with themselves. And so I think that could be one of the positives too. So,
Those are a couple positive observations coming out of this. Thank you for sharing those with me.
yeah.
And thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Gosh, thank you so much. It's been really nice. I really appreciate talking to you.
Yeah. I'll check back in a little later on and see how things are going with you.
Okay, that sounds great.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please stay tuned for further interviews with more guests, and I'll be checking back with Alejandro later to see how things are going for him in Buenos Aires. I'm your host, Josh Elliott, and this has been So How Are You Doing? If you can, please subscribe and rate this program over on iTunes. Stay safe, everyone.